As always, these stories do contain some disturbing subject matter, and viewer discretion is advised. And if you have a story you'd like to send my way, just go to astheravendreams.com and click the button to do so. And of course, thank you. I have lived in the same house my entire life, and many strange things have occurred there. But these recent events are just odd to me. My family rescued a stray cat, now my best friend, about 7 to 8 months ago. He's still young, about 2 years, I believe. My mom has been someone who would, for some reason, have dreams of events right before they occur. She can't control them or anything, but there are some times of deaths of loved ones which would turn out to be true. So, I guess you could say that she is open to the paranormal. I've experienced some strange things in the house, such as shadows waving at me, and I don't mean at the corner of my eye. They would be waving directly at me. But that all happened when I was younger, so I'm still skeptical about the paranormal. Although I have seen a UAP with my family when I was younger, and I still have no explanation for it, but that's a story for another time. Now, regarding my cat. There was this night about a couple of months ago when my mom felt the cat jump on her bed. She then felt the cat walk up to her face, but she got annoyed and covered her face with the blankets, expecting the cat to bother her for food. The cat then clawed at the blankets, trying to take them down from her face. This happened for about 20 minutes. This was until she got so annoyed that she got up and turned on the lights. But she then saw how the door was closed, and that the cat wasn't even in her room at the time. I was actually awake around the time when this happened to her. I have trouble sleeping, and the cat was sleeping next to me that night. The strange thing is that I actually heard footsteps walking toward my door, which was closed, which then stopped as I looked at the door. I then heard them continue away from my door and toward the room where my mom sleeps. Beside the occasional knocking noise and footsteps, not too much has happened since then. But last night, it seemed like something was messing with me. My cat was also sleeping with me last night, and right when I was about to fall asleep, I woke up completely, as I hear the noise my cat makes with his claws when he stretches on the carpet, which is almost like a popping and tearing noise. I sit up, and the noise suddenly stops. I laid back down, and when I was falling asleep again, the noise started up. I saw my cat wake up as well, and he began turning his head to look around the room to try and see what the cause of the noise was. At that point, I was just trying to ignore the noise and sleep, since I have school this morning. However, my cat was more annoyed than me, and he got up and walked around the edges of my bed, looking around to find the source of the noise. The creepy thing is that the noise seemed to move around. At first, it sounded like it was right outside of my door, but then it sounded like it was in the ceiling above me and then right underneath my bed. The noise would just continue to jump around the room. My cat walked up to the headboard of my bed, which is cushioned, and he did the claw-popping noise thing just for a second, which was not normal, as every time he would do it for about a minute or so, but immediately after the second that he did it, the other noise stopped completely. And then my cat stopped and lay next to me again, and we both went to sleep. Also, for the past couple of weeks, I've been having horrible nightmares. Sometimes I can't even remember them, but I just remember the fear that I felt. And every time I wake up in a cold sweat, completely drenched. I don't know why all of this is happening, but perhaps there's a rational explanation for all of this that I just don't know of. maybe you guys have had similar experiences of some kind. I just need to get this out there. And I'll update the situation if you guys want, but for now, this is what has happened so far. The OP added an edit. I forgot to add the fact that there was a time when I was whistling during the night, and then all of a sudden I hear whistling back at me from across the house. I thought it was someone in my family doing it, so I went out there. Everyone was asleep, except my mom. I went up to her and asked her if she was doing it, and she said no and that she didn't hear it. But then I whistled again from right there, and again something whistled back at us from across the house. This time I knew for sure it wasn't my family, since no one was in that part of the house that the whistling was coming from. It was coming from the room that I was just in originally, and someone moved all the way over there. My mom heard it this time, and still both of us can't explain how something can clearly whistle back like that without being seen. This was way before my cat. I've also recently had times when my basement door, which has 3 locks on it, was wide open in the morning, even though I saw it closed right before I went to sleep. My parents have heard talking in the room while they're entering them, which the noise would stop when they fully enter. This happened in the same room that the basement door is in. I could try and record the noises that I've heard if they happen again, but I'll let you guys know. When I was around 11, I got very into fairies, but more in a witchy way, I guess you could say. I realize that's kind of odd for a kid to be into things like this, but you've got to know that I was very imaginative and a somewhat lonely kid. I have always loved fairies, and my mom got me a book on them. It included fairy language and a list of gifts to offer fairies when you wish to interact with them. Of course, I wanted to contact them. What little girl wouldn't? For about a month, I wandered out to my backwoods and by a river, because according to the book, fairies like to hang out around water, and I would leave them little notes written in the supposed language, along with little gifts and offerings. I would make them little leaf baskets, leave them candy or flowers, things like that. I even recited a chant. I think that part of me knew that it was silly and that I'd probably never get results, but damn if I wasn't determined. So I kept on. At one point, my gifts and notes started disappearing from the bench that I left them on. I figured it was the wind or birds taking it, but a small part of me hoped that it was something else. A month of this nonsense, and I was getting very discouraged. I decided to leave a few more gifts for them, and this time I weighed them down with small rocks, so that they wouldn't blow away and I would know for sure. A day went by and my gifts were still there. Another day, same thing. Then, on the 3rd day of checking, I found the gifts gone but the rocks still there. Only the rocks were moved around. I don't remember how soon after that this happened, but eventually I got what I had wanted. I wandered out into the woods and saw by the river 2 monarch butterflies. They were very large and I wanted to see them up close. However, one landed on a branch close to the path where I was standing, and I noticed that this butterfly had limbs. Tiny, thin, pale limbs. Hands? Feet? I stopped dead in my tracks and looked hard to make sure that I was not hallucinating. It was broad daylight and I could see it very clearly. It wasn't a butterfly. It was a fairy. She had long, thin brown hair that went down past her feet, and a blue dress that looked like a small scrap of fabric. But what terrified me above all else was her face. Her eyes were giant, black, bug or alien-like eyes, but she definitely had a face, and she definitely saw me. I didn't even try to go look at the other one because I ran. I was so scared that I bolted home and locked my door. After freaking out and keeping an eye on my backyard, the backwoods through the window, I went back. No surprise, they were gone. And I never saw them again, despite me trying over and over again. My gifts were never taken again. I felt sad and stupid, because I felt like I had ruined my chance to have fairy friends, but knowing what I do now, it was probably a blessing that they left me alone. What do you guys think? Has anyone else seen a fairy? And did they look like this? I just need to find someone else who has seen what I have seen. It's something that I'll never forget. I remember her so clearly that I could draw her. The story is hard for anyone who didn't see what happened to believe. Sometimes it's still hard for me to believe. But I'm hoping that someone on here can relate or explain. About 3 years ago, I was in my hometown with some friends, and it was around 12 at night. We were near these soccer fields in our town, and there were 6 of us packed into a vehicle. We were at the top of this hill that overlooked the soccer fields, and at the edge of the field there was a thick tree line. As a group of kids about to head to college after that summer, you can probably imagine what we were all doing there at that time of night. This is one reason nobody believes any of us when we tell them what all 6 of us saw. Anyways, I'm in the middle row of seats, and we're all talking, laughing, just doing our thing, and all of a sudden the 2 people in the front start to freak out. And I mean like panic, scared kind of freak out. They started saying that we should go because they saw something really weird in the tree line across from us. We all laughed at them and blew it off and continued what we were doing. A couple of minutes later, the 2 people next to me start to also say that they saw whatever it was in the tree line. At this point, I'm getting nervous too, but I still hadn't seen what they were talking about. I asked what it looked like. They told me it looked like a big, blue person. I laughed so hard that I thought my friends were all in on some kind of prank to make me scared or something. But then they made me keep looking where they had seen the entity. About 2 minutes passed, and as we sat there in silence waiting, I saw it. Across in the tree line, what looked like a transparent yet solid blue being slowly stepped out of the trees. It looked like there was energy flowing through its human-like body. It was a light yet bold blue color. The entity had to be 7 or 8 feet tall, and we all confirmed that we were seeing the same thing, and described it to each other. The being stood there for a minute and then turned around and walked back into the woods. We waited there in disbelief for a while before deciding that we should get out of there. I tell a lot of people about this story in hopes that one day someone will believe what happened or give some sort of explanation. About 15 years ago, I traveled to Spain with my best friend. We were both around 20 at the time, living a carefree young adult life. You know, just 2 guys having a great time. We were in a warm country, no carefully filled itinerary whatsoever, and just living in the moment, doing whatever we felt like. My friend, who originally came from Spain, still had family there, which had made the month-long travel very affordable, since they offered us free accommodation, a roof over our heads, a working bathroom, with fresh showers and 3 meals a day if we liked. They also gave us a spare key so we could come and go as we pleased. During the day, we often went swimming to keep us as cool as possible, and during the evenings, we often explored the city, went for drinks, or went to a club. On a certain day, Somewhat more to the end of our month-long stay there, the father of our host family, my friend's uncle, took us out for a fishing trip. We had a lot of fun out on the sea, although the trip was cut short because we had a bit too much fun consuming beers. The burning summer sun, too many beers, and the wavy feeling of being out on the open sea made for a very bad case of seasickness for both my friend and myself. His uncle thought it was funny, though. After having had an afternoon rest, or as they called it, siesta, and a very fulfilling late-night dinner, we decided to go back out to the beach. We took a couple of cold beers with us. However, we didn't take as many as we were still feeling a bit groggy from before. It was a beautiful night. Open sky, no clouds, little to no light pollution, making the twinkling stars very visible and present. Being on vacation, being young on a still warm but comfortable summer night with the light breeze and a starry sky, it was the perfect moment to talk about the meaning of life. About what we liked to achieve one day, about what was worth it or what wasn't, if there was any other intelligent life out there, if we would live for another 1,000 years or so. The crashing of the waves against the sand of the beach and the rocks was very calming, and it was lulling us into a meditative state. Only that moment in that place seemed to exist. There was no outside world, no life, no responsibilities, no obligations, and no expectations. No working hard to get somewhere. It was that moment that we noticed something was off. The crashing of the sea against the sand of the beach sounded different, harder, like something was moving in it. Under the waves, a vague shape started to form. As it neared the shoreline, it started to get the shape of a dog. We both looked at each other and noticed that we had been holding our breaths for about the minute that it took the dog to crawl from the sea to the shoreline. The tension broke because we both burst out laughing, because we had been so easily startled by something so innocent. But then my friend asked the question that made the newly regained light mood go away in an instant. Where did that dog come from, though? There's no one around. We never saw any dog go into the sea, nor was there any dog swimming around. That thing came from under the water. Now that he had worded it like that, it seemed rather curious. And actually, that dog seemed pretty big for any existing dog that I had ever seen. As it was crawling along the beach, solely illuminated by the first quarter moon, it looked the size of a small horse, but in the shape of a dog or wolf with matted fur. It had very present, bony joints in its knees and elbows, and it walked a bit awkwardly. My friend and I were debating if we should follow the beast and decided that we did actually want to find out what exactly it was. I took out my phone and started to film it, for as far as any 2008 smartphone could film in the dark. By the time we reached the place at the beach where it had left the water, it had already reached the sand dunes and disappeared into them. We saw that it had left a track and decided to follow that into the dunes. We weren't prepared for what we saw next, though. The beast had left a track in the wet sand in the form of individual hoof prints in a straight line, instead of a crisscross pattern as with any four-legged animal. No horse could have walked in such a line, and even though it had looked the size of a horse, it hadn't looked anything like the shape of a horse, nor were horses aquatic animals. We followed the track to the dunes and went over the first dune when we saw the beast standing about 10 meters from us in a speck of moonlight. It didn't look anything like a dog, either. It looked like it had the lower half of a goat and the upper half of something like a werewolf or something. Just the dimensions were off, the shapes were awkward. It was such a big animal, and neither of us could place it under any existing animal that we knew of. With matted fur and bony joints, it had just come out of nowhere from under the water, but clearly could walk and survive on the land as well, and it left hoof marks in a straight line. Because we had just stumbled through the bushes closely behind the beast and had given away our presence, it slowly started to turn its head towards us. While it was turning towards us, it stood on its hind legs. Not only was this an animal that came from under the water, as well as could survive on the land and walk on 4 legs. It could clearly stand and walk very well on 2 legs. The beast gained even more size by standing on its hind legs and must have been around 2.5 meters big. It stared at us with red, glowing eyes. These were not to be mistaken with the eyes of any nocturnal animal with reflective eyes. These were actually glowing from within. I felt stuck in my spot, completely frozen. But luckily my friend, who was 2 steps behind me, had the mind to run away and pull me with him. We ran for what felt like an hour, but must have been closer to 10 minutes, because we reached the house of my friend's family before we knew it. The beast hadn't followed us, or at least not all the way. We went in and told the entire story to his uncle. Of course, he thought that we must have still been drunk and tired, and had seen things that weren't there. But when we showed him the recording, he went pale. He took a shovel. A gun would have been more impressive against a beast like that, but it's not like the average European has a gun lying around. And he asked us to show him where we had seen it. We searched for almost 2 hours, but we didn't find the beast again. However, we did find the hoof marks, albeit a bit washed up because of the current sea level. We went back home, trying to make something of what we had just seen, but couldn't. We needed to know what animal we had seen. We started Googling all kinds of things. Of course, with the lower half of the beast looking like a goat, we stumbled upon a lot of myths about the devil, which we discarded. We had seen an actual live beast that wasn't known by humanity yet, and we wanted to know if any other people had seen anything like it. It was only when we Googled hoof marks 1 straight line that we stumbled upon the term the devil's footprints. So it was an actual thing, or at least something that had supposedly been seen before according to myths and stories. But they must have had some truth to them since they described exactly what we had just seen with our own eyes. The few days we had left in Spain, we spent our nights out with my friend's uncle trying to find this beast again, but to no purpose, as we never did see it again. When I came home a few days later, I saved the recordings on my hard drive, not sure what to do with it yet. I didn't want to be the crazy guy that had just seen the devil, because I still don't believe that I did. I just wanted to know what animal this was and how come we haven't documented this beast yet. I tried to forget about it, but I couldn't. And a year later, I decided I wanted to publish the recording in the hope that anyone could make sense of what we had seen that night. The uncle of my friend hadn't seen the beast in all that time, and had asked around town if anyone had ever seen it, which they hadn't. I had switched phones by then, but luckily I had the recording saved on my desktop, where I replayed it at least 1,000 times. I went to boot up my desktop, and something was wrong. I had to restart my desktop a couple of times, and after booting it up into safe mode, I got a message that my hard drive had crashed. I tried whatever was possible to try, but I couldn't recover the recording in any way. 15 years later, I'm still racking my head over what the beast we encountered could have been. But by now, it's a story my friends believe to be for making conversation. Only that friend and his uncle are still branded by the experience as well. My friend even took it so far as to go live in Spain again, near the beach where this all happened, and still continues to actively look for the beast to this day. Maybe one day he'll find it. This is my second post here, and it's again about my personal experience after walking in the night park near my house. It's right on the edge of the city, and while the park looks like about 2 square miles of wild nature, it's surrounded with city on 3 sides, and with a suburban area and mall from the 4th. Thus, it's not some wildlands or Bigfoot, but apparently this place has something. As always, after work, I sometimes go to this park at night. The place is safe. There's no animals bigger than squirrels, so there's nothing to really worry about. This time, I decided to not walk by the trails and alleys, but to go in the distant part, where on the bottom of a wide ravine flows a small and shallow stream. The stream supports local ponds. The shores are open and have some sticky black clay on them in some parts. The local village long ago was named Black Mud after this. But in many places, a meter or 2 from the shore, there's bushes and trees. I was going by the shore. The night was clear enough, and there's no trees above the stream, so I could see without a flashlight. Nothing suspicious. Only the ordinary night forest sounds. Then, I saw some movement behind in the bushes in front of me, where the stream turns from the shore. Here, I should add, that overall, while I'm a bit afraid of the dark, yes, it's a strange combination with night park walks, I got used to the park at night. I visited it for years, so almost every part is familiar to me. Besides, it's fully surrounded by civilization. So, I saw the movement in those bushes about 15 meters away from me. Slowly, and trying not to make sound by stepping on a branch on the shore, I walked forward between the bushes where there was some free space. Enough for me to get forwards and in between them. Behind them there was a small meadow, and then... well, here it's hard for me to tell. My mind, since then, wants me to think that I saw a dog, but I can't remember the visual of the dog. No breed, no size, nothing. I don't remember what I saw there, but what I did next was that I instinctively rushed backwards to the stream. I took from the ground the biggest branch that I could see, and I ran away from there, looking backwards often, but there was nothing. I stopped only on the hill in half a mile, overlooking the foresty ravine bottom around the stream. It was calm and quiet. I finally dropped my stick and confusedly went home. So far, I have no idea what that could have been. But back then it was like I was in panic mode for a few minutes, and then it was okay again. Like an on-off switch. Quick warning on this story. This story is pretty messed up and does include mentions of sexual assault to some degree of detail, so if that is something that you personally do not want to hear, I recommend skipping to the next story. All timestamps are down in the description below, and I'll give a few seconds of silence here for anyone who wants to pause and scroll down to the next story. When I was 16 years old, my best friend and I made the dumb decision to get matching tattoos from an older man who was doing tattoos illegally out of his home. He was well known in the area within our age group for giving cheap tattoos to minors. He had recently gotten out of prison for giving minors tattoos and not practicing under state guidelines. Needless to say, I don't know what the hell we were thinking, but hey, when you're a rebellious 16-year-old dumb as hell and have a chance to get a tattoo for $20, I guess any and all common sense flies right out the window. So, we set up a time with him to go over to get our tats. I don't remember the exact time we went over, but I remember it was already dark, so it must have been late evening. It was just the 3 of us alone in his house, or so I thought. I remember feeling very eerie being there. Something about him and the energy of the place that felt very off. But, being the dumb teen that I was, I chose to ignore those feelings and go through with it anyways. We were there for about 30 minutes, got our tattoos, and then left. Fast forward a few months, I see his picture and name on the news. At first I thought he got busted again for his illegal tattooing, but little did I know it was so much worse than that. He had been arrested for one of the most heinous crimes that one could commit. Turns out, he bought an old police car, a cop costume, some handcuffs, and he would go into parts of Portland that prostitutes frequented, impersonating a cop to arrest them. He would bring them back to his house and chain up the victims in his basement where they wouldn't be heard. There, he would repeatedly assault and torture them. I was absolutely sick to my stomach when I found this out. I cannot imagine what these women went through, and I still don't really want to know all the details. This was all happening around the same time that we were at his house, so the chances that one of his victims were there at the same time we were is fairly high. I thank God that nothing happened to us, but there's also a part of me that feels guilt. What if someone was screaming for help while we were there and we just couldn't hear them? Why didn't he kidnap us? We would have been the perfect targets. Every time I look at the tattoo, it's a horrible reminder of what could have been, so I'm planning on getting it covered up. Thankfully, all of his victims are alive, and I hope and pray that they're able to recover from this horrible act. He will be in prison for life with no possibility of parole. Always trust your gut. So, I'm going to start by saying that I'm basically a skeptic when it comes to the paranormal, although I love hearing stories and listening to others' points of view when it comes to that kind of stuff. And this is why I'm having such a hard time understanding what happened to me last September. My dad, grandma, grandpa, and I were attending my cousin's wedding in a small rural town just outside of South Haven, Michigan, late last summer. We rented a small house in town, which was located in a very wooded area, just off of a small lake. Something felt extremely off as soon as I got out of the car at our rental property. That's the best way that I could describe it. Something felt off and I was immediately uneasy, but being the skeptic that I am, I shrugged it off and chalked it up to being tired and anxious. The night that we arrived, my dad and I were having a smoke outside, and noticed how weird everything sounded. It was about 11 p.m. and there was no one else around. The trees were crackling incredibly loudly, and we were hearing strange animal noises, but nothing too out of the ordinary. Just the type of animal noises you would hear in rural Michigan. But they just sounded particularly strange to us for some reason. We said our goodnights and went to bed. The next morning, my dad told me that he went outside for a smoke at about 2 in the morning and heard what sounded to him like someone close by banging on metal siding. He said it sounded like it was next door, but didn't hear anything leading up to or preceding the loud banging, like footsteps or anything like that. We shrugged and laughed it off. The second night was when I heard the thing that I still can't stop thinking about 6 months later. It was about 11 p.m. or midnight, and I was having my last smoke of the night. My grandparents were already asleep and my dad had just gotten into bed, but was still awake and watching TV. I was sitting on the stairs outside with my back to the house looking straight out into the backyard. I then heard somebody shout my name in a very abrupt manner, loud and fast. It sounded like they were shouting toward me from the front of the house, like they were standing on the front porch shouting for me, knowing that I was at the back of the house. It sounded just like my dad, but it couldn't be him because I didn't hear the front door open or close or anything. Being a skeptic, I reminded myself to stay calm and I quickly walked into the house. My dad was sound asleep. There was no way that by the time I got to him, he could have gotten back into bed. I woke him up and asked him if he was outside screaming my name. He looked confused and said of course not. I started to get really freaked out at this point. I tried to go to bed, but couldn't get that scream out of my head. I was up all night trying to figure out what happened. I was honestly contemplating leaving, getting a hotel room somewhere close by and returning in the morning. Miraculously, I must have fallen asleep sometime around 3 in the morning. We woke up the next morning and I was so ready to get the hell out of that town. As soon as we left, the uneasy feeling I had the entire weekend disappeared. When I returned to work the next day, I told my coworker the weird experience that I'd had. Her face immediately dropped. She proceeded to inform me that this is quite common in the Appalachian area, regarding cryptids and other types of creatures. Apparently, they try to get your attention by mimicking someone close to you, and when you look at them, they kidnap you or something along those lines. But I was in Michigan. I tried to look up information about the town that I was in, but didn't find anything remotely interesting. Has anyone else had a similar experience? Not quite sure if this classifies as paranormal or just a coincidence to the nth degree, but I always found it incredibly strange. My ex-husband told me of a supposed song that kept following him around, as it were. He told me that for years as a child, he had vague memories of an 80s song that he kept hearing whenever he got into an elevator. He didn't know the title or who sang it, but had that hazy recollection of a tune that was ever present in the back of his memory. When he was in his mid-20s, he heard the song again while in an elevator on the way to a very important third interview for a job as an assistant marketing manager. This particular incident sticks with him because of the nature of the situation when he heard it this time around. While on his way to the interview on the 7th floor, the song again played, triggering his memory from when he was a kid. Suffice to say that he got the job, which brought back the memory of that song that played earlier that day. This caused my ex-husband to start researching, and he finally found out the name of the song was Careless Whisper by George Michael. He made it a point to keep track of every time he got into an elevator from that point onward to see if the song would play. Now, I know what some people might be thinking, that this sounds like a plot device from the first Final Destination movie, where everyone kept hearing John Denver before they died. But this situation was kind of the opposite, as my husband attributed hearing the song with good luck, as he landed his dream job after hearing the song on that one particular day. Anyways, over the next 6 years, my husband counted exactly how many times he boarded an elevator, which was a little over 100 times. According to him, 90 times out of that 100 or so, Careless Whisper played, which seems incredible. When he told me this story, I was skeptical, but I then witnessed it for myself more than once. The most notable time I remembered it playing, we were actually on our honeymoon and were riding the elevator up to our hotel room. As soon as the song started playing, he turned to me with an excited look and said, "See, babe, I told you." I kind of laughed and just reasoned that it was a coincidence, and maybe the song was on a kind of a loop and would play several times throughout a given day, along with all the other music. We stayed at that hotel for about 5 days, and without fail, every time we got on or off the elevator, that damn song would play, which admittedly I did find very odd. I still talk to my ex-husband as we're still good friends, And to this day, he swears that almost every time he gets on an elevator, Careless Whisper by George Michael always plays. What does everyone think of this? Is this just an incredible coincidence? Or is there more going on here? For background, in early 2021, my mom was very sick due to COVID, thyroid issues, and sepsis from a recent surgery to drain her lungs because they kept filling up with fluid. Eventually, her lungs had filled up with so much fluid and her body was so weak that, on Easter, her heart simply stopped beating and she collapsed. My little brother gave her CPR. It was his first time ever, and he was only 17, and miraculously kept her going until the paramedics came, without a single broken rib. Against all odds, they revived her and she pulled through all of the surgeries they did on her. When she finally woke up, she discovered that she couldn't move her legs due to Guillain-Barré syndrome, where her antibodies attacked her spine nerves. She's had to relearn how to swallow, use her muscles, go to the bathroom, and walk, and is still in that process. However, she's almost at a point where she doesn't need a wheelchair anymore. Everyone thought that she wasn't going to make it, but she pulled through miraculously. My mom said that before she was resuscitated, she went to heaven, where she was in a sunny and quiet park. She said that it was beautiful. She saw her family pets who recently had passed, including my soulmate black cat Chubby, who helped me through my adolescence. Chubby specifically was commanding her attention like he always did whenever I wasn't home to give him love, because I was always his first choice, but Mom was his second. And then she saw her grandma, my great-grandma, holding a baby. Great-grandma told her that when she is ready, the baby will be hers to raise. My mom realized that it was the baby she had miscarried in between me and my brother. And then she snapped back to the earthly world where she couldn't remember anything for a few minutes. Not even me, my dad, or my brother. My grandma, my mom's mom, passed away last week. She got very sick the day after Christmas. We had made the decision as a family to send her home from the hospital with hospice care, as the doctors couldn't get her kidneys to work the way they should. She passed over the course of a week at home, surrounded by family, and in a very similar manner that my mom almost did, from fluid in her lungs. She had congenital heart disease since June, among diabetes, hypertension, and some other heart issues, which caused her lungs to fill up, and so she had to get them drained every 2 weeks. But her body was tired and ready to go. We had the funeral yesterday, and I've been in pieces since. I like to think that Grandma's in heaven with my great-grandma, my grandma's mom, holding my mom's baby, excited to meet and love another grandchild. So this, my friends, was a collection of just some true scary stories from Reddit. Terrifying stories from Redditors all over the platform. A lot of them, well, no, all of them pretty terrifying. Yeah, I think it was a good grab bag. Really just creepy stories. Quite an enjoyable collection of stories, in my opinion. Definitely some really terrifying ones in there. And yeah. Hopefully you all did enjoy them. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button. If you didn't, then don't hit the thumbs up button. I understand. If you're new to the channel and liked what you heard, hit the subscribe button. If you're not new to the channel and didn't like what you heard, well, then you're probably not getting to this point of the video, huh? But if you did get to this point of the video and did not like the video whatsoever, you're free to leave me a comment letting me know why you didn't like my video. Or on the flip side, if you did like it, leave me a comment letting me know that you did, how you're doing, what your favorite story was, etc., etc., etc. Yeah. There's also the Super Chats, the memberships, and the Patreon, where you can get early access to content like this, if you so choose. Always appreciated, never ever expected. All that said, my friends, I hope you're having a beautiful day. I hope that you remember you are loved, you are valid, and you are important. You're the best you that you can be. Never forget it, and never let anyone tell you otherwise. And, my friends, until I see you again, much love, and sleep well.